Well, thank you all.
Hi,
Um,
Vijay.
Hi.
Hello. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started as we're a few minutes over at this point. Um, so good morning to everyone joining from the United States, and good evening to those joining from India. Welcome to today's virtual workshop, the Scientific Industry Innovation and Governance Landscape for Biotechnology Research and Development in the United States and India. As most of you all know, this workshop is a key part of a kind of broader initiative uh, involving both of our nations, namely the International Bioeconomy Roundtable. Um, and really the goal of the workshop today is to foster both dialogue and collaboration on biotechnology and biomanufacturing, R&D within the bioeconomy. So our workshop will explore crucial topics, including scientific and technological developments, policies, practices, regulations, and standards for the bioeconomy and its related R&D, ways to both promote and protect the bioeconomy, as well as explore commercialization and application of bioinnovations, both bilaterally between the United States and India, as well as internationally. So to start, my name is Carmen Shaw, and I serve as the project director in the Policy and Global Affairs Division at the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. This is a cross-division collaboration with the Division on Earth and Life Sciences at the Academies. Before we go too far, I did want to mention that we will be recording this workshop, which will later be available on the workshop webpage. I think immediately following the conclusion of the workshop. So just so everyone is aware. So now to start, I want to explain some of the background that went into the workshop topics and the programming that you'll see over the course of the next couple of days, namely the outreach and planning process. Crystal, if you can go to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you. So at the start of the year and really since the ending of last year as well, the academies conducted outreach meetings and a planning trip to India, engaging with leaders from academia, government, industry, and public-private partnerships. Here are only some of those organizations and entities that we spoke with. These discussions provided really valuable insights and helped to guide the topics that we'll address in this workshop later on. And then we also convened a bilateral US-India workshop planning committee. So if you can go to the next slide. So this was our planning committee. The members are shown here. They help to later refine and expand on these topics. And so I want to extend a huge thank you to each of these members, along with the associated staff team, for you all's dedication and expertise, and your time. So we've met over a series of months now to put together this programming, and we couldn't do it without all of the individuals listed here. And then this effort was further synergized through collaboration and partnership with ABLE, the Association of Biotechnology-led Enterprises, some of whom are here today, so welcome. And they later became our partners for the workshop, as well as some of the future activities for the bioeconomy roundtable as well. So it's with all of these combined efforts that that produced the workshop agenda that we'll see shortly. So this workshop is really, again, a kind of landscaping activity for the broader International Bioeconomy Roundtable, which is currently in development. If you can go to the next slide, Crystal. Thank you. So the roundtable will serve as a global platform for ongoing dialogue and collaboration amongst international stakeholders to talk out their challenges, opportunities where the global bioeconomy is concerned, and come up with implementable solutions that can be applied across sectors. So if you want to stay connected with updates on the roundtable, please scan the QR code and it will lend you to the project webpage where you can stay up to date. We will also have a showcasing event at the Global Bio India Conference in New Delhi, India next month, September 12th through the 14th. ABLE is also helping to organize that as well. And they've kindly offered a time slot for us to officially launch the International Bioeconomy Roundtable. So we hope you all will be able to join us for this event or stay in the know otherwise. So before we dive into the workshop discussions, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules first. So Crystal, if you can go to the next slide. Okay. So as a reminder, this is a public webcast workshop to discuss and exchange data and ideas. We'll ask each speaker to limit their remarks to 5 to 7 minutes at most to ensure we have time for everyone. We encourage attendees to be an active participant in the discussions. So please use the chat box underneath the webcast video Slido to submit your questions to our speakers, panelists, and moderators. Comments made and ideas shared during this workshop should be attributed to individual speakers and not their organizations unless otherwise stated. And thoughts shared during the course of the workshop should not be interpreted as the opinion of the National Academies, except for these housekeeping rules. Immediately following this workshop, as well as the Global Bio India session, a brief written summary of the workshop will be published within a few months, which will be accessible and shared to you all. And again, we're going to record the full workshop and post on the workshop webpage immediately following the conclusion of the event itself. So now I want to turn it over to our co-chairs of the workshop planning committee, Dr. Deepti Tanjore from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and Ms. Shafali Misra from Biocon, who will introduce the workshop objectives along with the first session of the agenda. So Dr. Tanjore, over to you.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Please excuse me, my voice is a little bit out of shape right now. Good evening to those joining from India and a good morning to all my US colleagues. It's pretty early in the morning for some of us on the West Coast here. My name is Deepti Tanjore. I'm the director of a scale-up facility called the ABPDU at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. We are a Department of an energy-funded facility that focuses on scaling up technologies developed by innovators from universities, national labs, and industry. Typically, startups tend to find it most useful to work with our process engineering team to scale up from milliliters to up to 300-liter scale. And then many of these innovative companies are now going to India for further scale up and commercialize their technologies. So we now have good collaborations with many Indian entities. And if you couldn't tell already, I am originally from India. So it's a real honor to co-chair this workshop. And this workshop is a significant one because National Academies decided to start this international partnership, and they chose India as their first. So it's indeed a special one. Before I move forward, I want to take a moment to thank our National Academies team here, led by Carmen and Lily, Rita, Daisia, and others, for putting an incredible amount of effort to make this even possible. I've been part of other National Academy workshops, and this was definitely a tricky one. So thank you very much for putting in the time and effort. I also want to thank them for putting together an excellent committee that Carmen just pointed to earlier. I've learned a lot from this committee over the past couple of months. They're not only experts in their own individual field, they were super energized, and because of their enthusiasm, we were able to put together panels with diverse expertise to ensure that this workshop is a success. Most of all, it's been an absolute pleasure to work alongside my co-chair, Shefali Mishra, who really steered us in the right direction on many occasions. So it's time for me to hand over to Shefali to again steer us in the right direction. Shefali, over to you.
Hello. Good morning and good evening, everyone. I resonate warm welcome on behalf of the National Academics, the very diligent and dedicated planning team that we've had, and Able, who's our co-partner in this initiative, and welcome you all. It's my honor and privilege. Before we begin the context setting and taking you through the key themes, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Shefali. I currently serve as the Group Vice President for Public Policy at Biocon. Biocon is a global biopharmaceutical company operating in 120 countries. My role largely involves advancing research and innovation agendas across the pharmaceutical, public health, and biotech space. And my expertise across public health, pharma policy, biotech has provided me with the opportunity of working with several government agencies and non-profits, including corporates in India, South Asia, and the UK. It's with this broad perspective that I welcome you all as we begin our discussions to explore the future of biotechnology and biomanufacturing at this excellent global stage. This gathering is particularly meaningful because it represents a crucial step forward in our shared journey to advance solutions hitherto unexplored in biotechnology and biomanufacturing, finding solutions which are cross borders and finding opportunities that can benefit everyone on a global scale. As we come together, I'm also reminded of the long-standing and robust collaboration between India and the United States. Our partnership has already led to remarkable innovations and technology transfer, skill sharing. These past achievements are testaments to what we can accomplish when we work together, put our brains together, have conversations on policy, on regulations, on the legality of things, on opportunities of international collaboration. Let me take you through the key themes and objectives of the workshop. Over the course of this workshop, we'll dive into several themes. And today, we'll be focusing on the current state and future trends in biotech and biomanufacturing within India and the US. We'll discuss what it means to have a successful bioeconomy, identify opportunities, obstacles, and examine the latest innovations and emerging technologies. We'll also explore the critical role that policy and regulation and law plays in fostering these advancements. In today's globalized world, it's not just enough to innovate. We need to innovate to scale, and we need to innovate in a responsible way. And we need to support it by sound governance and international cooperation. This means We also look on to the government, the regulatory bodies, the scientific organizations, and ask a question, how can we all collaborate together? So tomorrow, we will discuss some of these tenets within the broader implications of the innovations that we do and the work that we do. We'll examine how the bioeconomy intersects with biosafety, national security, law, global trade practices, issues that are increasingly important in a world that is so interconnected and geopolitically complex. We also look forward to having your inputs on what we need to think about for the future. Um, Finally, we'll discuss the future of education and the workforce development. As we strive to scale up biomanufacturing and the biotech, we need to ensure that our educational institutions, industry partnerships are prepared for the next generations of scientists, engineers, and policymakers. As I close, and before we move on to our first session, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our distinguished speakers who are coming up next, who will provide a brief overview of the state of India-US collaboration in this field. I welcome Dr. Sanjay Mishra from India's Department of Biotechnology and Dr. Kate Stevens from the US Department of State to share their insights on how we can continue to strengthen and advance this incredible partnership. Dr. Sanjay Mishra serves as a senior advisor at the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. Previously, he served as the advisor and head of the Inspire division of the Department of Science and Technology in India and has held academic positions at institutions and universities, including Shiv Nadar, Queensland University of Technology, and the Institute of Engineering and Technology in Uttar Pradesh, India. I welcome him. Welcome, sir. Dr. Kate Stevens is a Foreign Affairs Officer at the Office of Science and Technology Cooperation at the US Department of State. Welcome. She currently leads efforts to strengthen international science and technology collaborations and discussions. Previously, she held significant roles in academic research at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, focusing on advancing global partnerships and innovation in biotechnology and related sectors. Thank you once again, all of you. Looking forward to incredible collaboration and conversations. And I hand it over to the next set of speakers and my best wishes.
I think a very good morning to all the participants, delegates, speakers who have joined from the US, and also a very good evening to all my friends, scientists, and participants who have joined from Indian side. So I think we have got a morning and evening together. On behalf of the Department of Biotechnology, first of all, I would like to welcome each one of you who have given time to attend this very important virtual workshop, and which aims to primarily bring the scientific communities, the investment fund, the innovators, and the think tanks together in some sense to draw a future roadmap, what we have done, where we are, and what we should be doing in the future. This is a kind of a broad, I'll say, brainstorming workshop where we all have come together. Although it covers the scientific, industry, innovation, and government landscape for biotech research and development in US and India. So this is not a pure research and development workshop. The scope of discussion is much wider. I'm very happy for that, because most of the time as a DBT person, I'm mostly involved with the pure R&D workshops and meetings and programs. But this is much wider. So thanks for arranging. Thanks to the National Academies from US and the Indian ABIL, the foundation, which has come forward to organize and conceptualize such a meeting. Now, as I said in the beginning, that I would like to just give a brief about my footprints from Department of Biotechnology, what we have been doing, which is moving successfully, what we have achieved very briefly. I know about the time limitation, but more important, this is the time to ponder and reflect what we have achieved and what should be or what could be achieved in future time. Now, when I say this, I'm fully aware of the expectation from both the sides, from Indian government side, and also I can see the keen interest from the US side, that probably we move faster and make some impactful changes, not the incremental partnership, not the incremental, like the R&D and the usual stuff which we have been doing. Perhaps this is the time where we need to go with a bang, something drastically much impactful. So, so I'll briefly. Many of you in this workshop, I can see, are aware of the programs. But very quickly, I'll just just pinpoint. I'm very proud to say that the Department of Biotechnology, where I work, started in 1986, and just after 1 year, we started an Indo-US Vaccine Action Program (VAC), and this program, VAC program, is successfully running even now. So you can imagine the partnership with Department of Biotechnology has already fostered in last almost 50 years time. And the Department of Biotechnology is working not only with the US, but also in the Indian side. We have got the ICMR and the department's Ministry of Health as well. And from the US side, we have got the program with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, National Institute of Health, and many of you are aware with the RotaVac, which is the first Indian indigenous vaccine, which has been a kind of milestone and game changer in the area. This is just to give the how strong our partnership has been in the past and how we have achieved. Now, apart from that, I'll come very quickly. There are a number of programs I need not to list. Like I myself take care of the Corona programs, where we send about 75 Indian students to the top US institutions on summer intern. We do have a Indo-US Vision program where we support joint programs. And then DST, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, has got a bilateral programs which is being successfully running between the US institutions and the Indian institutions from many years. But coming to the more recent, I'll not list the number because otherwise there's a huge list of joint programs between the Indian institutions and the US institutions in the area of science and technology. But if I come to the last 1 or 2 years since I've joined the Department of Biotechnology, last year, the department has already signed an implementation agreement on research cooperation with National Science Foundation, NSF. And the call has been announced in last year, and already the scientists and the institutions are working. So that was started, I think, within 6 months' time, the program was conceived and has implemented with all clearances, and money has been transferred and scientists are working. So this is just a recent example. Another example where I would like to bring to the attention is one of the examples which I came to know very recently in the India-US Cancer Moonshot program, which is where we have developed a cost-effective biotherapeutics from a partnership between IIT Bombay, Tata Memorial Hospital, National Cancer Institute, US, which has led to a spin-out of immunoACT, which proved to be a game changer in the area of affordable gene therapy. Because I saw that this technology, which has come up from the US side and also from the Indian side, has passed all the clinical trials, has passed the regulatory clearances. And I was very happy that I think every week I was told last month that about 15 to 20 patients are treated, not only from India, but I was told that patients from the New Zealand, they have come to the Tata Memorial with this immunotherapy, and they're also being treated. I mean, my point to just bring out that we do have the capacity, the eagerness, and also the what I call the past friendship or past understanding to continue these programs. But now I will come to the areas where we are working, and at least DBT point of view and also DST point of view, we need to strengthen and go ahead in much more wider ways if possible. For example, as you are aware that the Government of India has changed the policy of the putting the ethanol into the gasoline or the petrol and the petrol. So now the 20% E20 is the new norm in India. And the Government of India with all the ministries is trying to have the production of biofuel to augment the energy efficiency. Now, in that area, already you may be aware that Indo-US Joint Clean Energy Research Development Center and also the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, these are the areas where we are already collaborating, institution to institution and government to government institutions. The IICT, Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, is already working with US-based company like Genomatica, and they are working together for biofuel technologies, because this partnership is aiming to enhance the efficiency of biofuel production and contribute to both the country's energy security as well as the sustainability goals. So these are the areas which we have successfully worked, which we are working. Now, in my opinion, what is the next? What should be done? Already Carmen and I think Dr. Mishra in the beginning, they have already given the one word which is echoing in my ear is the scale up. So I would like to emphasize from my side that yes, anything what we have been doing, now the time has come that it should be scale up. And when I say scale up, that includes a broad meaning that if I look back, my past footprints, especially from DBT, DST Scientific Ministry, has been on the R&D side, where the TRL level 1, 2, 3, we were confined most of the cases. Of course, there are a few exceptions. We have got the vaccines, where we have moved from the research to the delivery, to the products, and to the goods which has been used in the health sector, healthcare, or in environment or agriculture area. But probably we need to scale up in that area, in many other areas, to move from TRL 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layer, where we need to increase the what we call the high value chain for the public good of both the countries. That is the first point which I wish to see in the future. And I'm very happy that the workshop has already outlined these areas in their agenda. The second point which I wish, there's a good news, I think many of you may be aware, but I'm very happy because in the beginning, the organizers have pointed about, I will say, not only pointed out, but emphasized about the role of the policy, regulatory framework, legal framework. Now, in this context, I think 2 weeks back, maybe 2 or 3 weeks back, the Indian Drug Controller, which is equivalent of the FDA in US, has already, under the rule 101, they have given exemptions of the new drugs and clinical trials waiver for 4 or 5 countries. US is the first country among the list. So that means this is one of the friction point, if I can say, which was already suggested in the past in several meetings, because the regulatory environment, especially on the drug side and the clinical trial side, was a time-consuming process in India. Now, with this waiver, now the new drugs and also the clinical trials will be much easily available in Indian market for either it's for joint collaboration or otherwise also. So that is just one good news I'm saying. Now, the other point is, which I wish to point out in this meeting, is that probably I'll be very happy if at the end of the meeting or the workshop, if we can come out more sub-specific areas or sub-themes, because broad themes we are aware, but sub-areas or some specific areas where both countries have the strength and it's a win-win for both the countries. Probably that will be much more helpful from the government perspective to take it forward. And when I say that, that also includes, I'll repeat, beyond research and development. I would love to have something in technology transfer, because India is looking for a manufacturing base for high-end technologies. That is the area of priority we would love to have. And also, we will have to have the a bit understanding. For example, I mentioned about the drug control problem, which has been solved, or at least has been, I'll not say the completely zero, because the regulation will always there. But that has been now being harmonized to make easier access to the Indian patients, drug market, and clinical trials. Similarly, if there are other areas in policy, in regulations, which we believe that this is impending or this is a friction point, probably if that can be pointed out from my department, we can try our best to solve those. and also with certain solutions that if this is the problem and this is what we intend to do, that will help me to take it forward. The other point which I wish to point out, I think this workshop can also look at between the US and Indian side, there are multiple platforms of partnership and multiple programs. When I say that means that there is a Indo-US bilateral program, which is run by the science ministries, which is a pretty much bottom-up approach to support scientific research. But also we do have platforms like Quad, where I am representing the, from Department of Biotechnology into the synthetic biology area, for example. And then also we have the other programs where we have the critical and emerging technologies. So point that in what platform, in what programs, the action need to be done. If that can come out, that will help me, because everything, as you know, cannot be done by one department or one person in a government. We have got multiple agencies, multiple levels of, like departments to carry out the work. So if so, at the end of the workshop, if you can specifically point out that these are the action points, these are the suggestions to improve the partnership between two countries, I will take it forward from my department. Then, yes, the other point is we are looking for a few short-term and few long-term partnerships. Already I said in science and technology, we have, as I said about the WAP, this is the program in vaccine, which was started in 1987, and even now this is working. So look at the length of time the partnership has worked together. So similarly, if we can classify few suggestions or few programs which could be short-term and a few which will be long-term. And again, I say, because there are certain areas which I believe are low-hanging fruits, which can be done by simple change in policy, a little what we call nudging in the government system will ease the business, will ease the science and technology, will ease the forward movement of the scientist, and also in the value chain. That will take it forward. So if we can get all those things in slightly categorized fashion, that will help us. Last point, I'm very happy that the previous speaker also mentioned about the education. Probably from Department of Biotechnology, let me pull that. We are here to take education and high-end research, whether that is at PhD level, postdoctoral level, or even at the professional, societies level, what we call the fellowships for professors. We are more than happy to accommodate and think about any joint partnership in the education sector. But probably we interact more than 80% time with education sector in India, in science and technology, than other sectors in India. So I think these are a few points which came into my mind, although they may look disconnected, but probably this is the whole, I will say, bouquet of what we have done very briefly. But what should be done or what could be done, these are my thoughts, my suggestions, and I look forward from listening to this program, and at the end, a summary which will help me, the department-wise, also Government of India-wise, to take it forward. Thank you very much.
Should I just chime in now? I think so. Okay. Thank you so much, Sanjay. It's a hard act to follow, but I will try to add to your points, and many of them I agree upon. So good evening to my colleagues in India. Good morning to colleagues in the United States. Again, my name is Kate Stevens. I serve as the Biotechnology Policy Advisor within the Office of Science and Technology Cooperation at the Department of State's Bureau of Oceans, International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, or OES for short. Within our office, the Office of Science and Technology Cooperation, we coordinate with our U.S. science agencies to promote bilateral research and development cooperation, as well as to engage in multilateral fora to advance responsible science and technology relationships with our global partners. And I'm really thrilled to be joining you today. I'm actually in a hotel room in Chennai and really look forward to meeting with some colleagues in Delhi next week. Now more than ever, the bilateral science and technology relationship between the United States and India is paramount to harnessing our collective ingenuity. We have a lot of think power in both of our countries, and it can be put to good to drive innovation, to address global challenges, and for the shared benefit of our people and our economies. Under ISET, the US-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, which was launched a couple of years ago by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, we've already made together significant progress in our bilateral cooperation in clean and renewable energies, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and the topic du jour, biotechnology and biomanufacturing. Biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovations are paramount to addressing some of our most pressing global challenges. This includes a lot of the topics that we've already been working on for quite some time, which is, developing vaccines in a timely way. Now we have new biotechnology techniques to further that development, and also next generation medicine, but also for mitigating and adapting to the climate crisis, addressing biodiversity loss, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels in everyday items like plastics and fuels, and ensuring food security and also supply chain resilience. Biomanufacturing and biotechnology innovation also have the potential to fundamentally alter for the better how we live our lives, how we engage our planet's resources, and how our economies are driven. As we make investments in biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation and infrastructure, we must also be mindful to implement appropriate safeguards to mitigate against potential risks. I'm sure most people on this call know, but since President Biden signed the September 2022 executive order on advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation for a safe, sustainable, and secure bioeconomy, the United States has been working hard to catalyze a whole of government action to drive new biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovations, to create enabling environments to ensure promising innovation is brought to market and able to scale up, and that new bioeconomy innovations are developed and utilized responsibly. A couple of key moments and follow-up after the executive order relevant to this particular conversation is that in March of last year, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy released the Bold Goals for U.S. Biotechnology and Biomanufacturing report that brings together in one document a vision for what is possible with the power of biotechnology and biomanufacturing, and outlines the associated research and development needs. This document really serves as a vision over the next 20 years for what may be possible with biotechnology innovation. A key component of our EO relevant to this dialogue is that it tasks the US government to work with international partners to strengthen and protect the global bioeconomy. With India as a global leader in both vaccine production and biofuel production, it makes good sense that India is a key bioeconomy partner for the United States. And under ISET, we're making great strides to build upon decades of collaboration and to further strengthen existing cooperation while also identifying new avenues for cooperation. Dr. Sanjay already mentioned the recent signing of the National Science Foundation and Department of Biotechnology implementation arrangement. And as he noted, in February of this year, they released the first year colleague letter for collaborative research focused on discoveries and innovations to advance biotech and promote the bioeconomy. In June, we launched the Bio5 Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Consortium with industry and government stakeholders from India and the United States, but also included Japan, Korea, and the European Union. And just a few weeks ago, as Dr. Sanjay noted, our governments met in Delhi for the inaugural US-India Cancer Dialogue, agreeing to cooperate further on harnessing AI for cancer care and advancements in novel therapeutics and precision medicine. Biotechnology will be key to achieving these targets. India's presidency of the G20 last year also saw the exciting launch of the Global Biofuels Alliance, where President Biden joined Prime Minister Modi in the launch, and where the United States as a founding member continues to work with India in setting the Global Alliance up. At the 2021 ministerial of the new US-India Strategic Clean Energy Partnership, we launched the public-private US-India Biofuels Task Force. And these efforts on biofuels really do build upon years of cooperation under the Joint Clean Energy Research and Development Center partnership between the US Department of Energy and the Government of India. A couple of years ago, in 2022, the US-India Science and Technology Endowment Fund, or USISTEF, I challenge everybody to say that 5 times fast. This organization funds joint technology development and commercialization, and it awarded 10 ignition grants to advance bilateral research and development towards net zero targets. Several of these grants actually included biotechnology-based applications, including for carbon capture technologies. Over the next 2 days, I'm excited that we'll hear from government and industry experts from both the United States and India on how to better facilitate research and development cooperation between our two countries. A few things initially come to mind for me. And I think many of these are common themes to what Dr. Sanjay mentioned earlier. The first is policies to facilitate promising research and development to come to market and to be scaled up and to be viable once scaled up. Of course, this includes policies. It also includes enabling regulatory environments as well. The second is around standards. We're looking at standards for data as well as other standards, including for precision engineering. When we talk about standards for data, we look at the potential of machine learning models and artificial intelligence to revolutionize the speed and scale of biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation. But of course, these are only as good as the data in which they can draw upon. I'll point to one report that was released in December by an interagency working group on data for the bioeconomy. It was called the Vision, Needs, and Proposed Actions for Data for the Bioeconomy Initiative. And it really seeks to create an interwoven data fabric that connects data with the infrastructure and computational resources necessary to analyze, synthesize, and use those data for the widest audience possible, and really outlines some of the ways in which the US government is thinking about data and creating the infrastructure to be able to harness all of the potential behind that data. And finally, I'll also footstomp something that Dr. Sanjay said, in that we have many different fora where we are engaging on these topics. And I think thinking creatively about how we might leverage these existing fora for cooperation to better further our research and development goals on bioeconomy. I'm here in Chennai because I've joined our acting assistant secretary for OES, Jennifer Littlejohn, on her trip, and she is interested in engaging, for example, in the Indo-US Science and Technology Forum. So thinking about IUSSTF and then also associated USISTEF, I have trouble saying it, and how they can be best leveraged for our research and development goals. How can we leverage other fora like the Quad that Dr. Sanjay mentioned? We have so many different avenues, and then thinking about how to fully capture the full scope from basic research and development up towards commercialization and scale up, so that our partnership can be most effective across the full technology spectrum is something keen and top of mind for us as well. With that, I'll go ahead and close. And I just want to say I very much look forward to the robust discussion today and tomorrow, and to continuing the dialogue into the future. And because I was remiss in thanking our sponsors earlier, thank you to Nasa and Carmen and your team for organizing. Very much appreciate you bringing this excellent workshop together. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your remarks, Dr. Sanjay, and also Kate. We so appreciate everything that you've shared with us, and we especially appreciate the call to action. And we appreciate the desire for all of us to come together as a community to outline ways we can move forward cooperatively. And I'll just note there were a few comments and questions that came in particular, one had to do with the question of biosafety across not just the jurisdictions at the central government, but throughout our two countries at the local levels and across the bioeconomy ecosystem. So we'll take that question up in tomorrow's panel, which is relevant to that topic given time. But I want to thank you both very much and invite you to stay and participate in the discussion as your time allows. And we invite you back, and we most importantly appreciate and look forward to your continued involvement in this project and in this work going forward. So thank you very much. And with that, we will turn to our next panel, which is entitled, "What are the future trends in biotechnology and biomanufacturing within the Indo-US bioeconomy?" And so we will make the transition to our panel with many thanks to our first two speakers.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Carter. I am moderating this first panel. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you to the organizers for putting this together. I've been a part of this committee, and I've learned a lot about the state of U.S.-India collaboration on the bioeconomy, and I'm excited to moderate this panel with our distinguished panelists. This panel is focused on the future. What are the future trends in biotechnology and biomanufacturing? We're going to try to pull on these different types of expertise in different kinds of sectors to try to understand what that looks like and to identify some key opportunities and challenges that we might be facing in the near and more distant future. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Each one will speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have time for discussion and questions after each of them gets to speak. Our first panelist is Dr. Vijay Raghavan. He is the former Principal Science Advisor for the Government of India at the National Center for Biological Sciences. So I'll invite Dr. Vijay to give his remarks. Oh, and Dr. Vijay, you are still muted. Yes.
Is it okay? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
It's such a great pleasure to be here following my colleagues earlier from the Department of Biotechnology, Dr. Mishra, and from the Department of State. Everything which needs to be said has been said about what's happening now and how one can do more of that. But really, the excitement also comes not just doing well what we are already doing, but to looking to the future. And the future holds two kinds of routes to us. One is the demand and the need of what needs to be done. And the second is the opportunity and the ways by which that can be done. And it's a rare confluence of these two and the capabilities and the growth in the Indian sector, combined with the deep development over decades in America, which allows our partnership to address important global opportunities and challenges. So what are the global challenges? The global challenges are very simply put, all of us know about it. There are consequences of the requirement for sustainable development. How do you lift millions out of poverty in new ways which don't expend fossil fuels in the way which we have been doing? And therefore, what are the routes to energy, the way our cities are structured, agriculture, health, and so on in this context? So that's the really big challenge. Related to that are the consequences of extreme weather and climate change. And that has also consequences from the biotech sector about how livelihood and health and disease need to be addressed. So these are the big time challenges. These are big time challenges because technology offers solutions, but the reach of the solutions to large populations remain a challenge. And the mpox situation is an example. You're going to have challenges of an available vaccine to be delivered frugally and on scale. And this is going to be a repeated situation unless we're able to address that to new ways of biomanufacturing and having companies address these issues without having to deal with market failure situations. So what are the technological opportunities we have at hand? There are two major opportunities which have been unraveling over the last decade or more, and they're coming together. One is the dramatic changes in our computational tools to address biological questions. We heard a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've also heard a lot from others in other contexts about modeling protein structure and design, and how the tools of these two combined are going to revolutionize at one end of the spectrum drug discovery, and at the other end feeding back into from pathology and from diagnostics into healthcare, and similarly to agriculture. Related to this advancement is an advancement in remote sensing. Space science, drones, and so on are enabling data collection on scale so that personalized medicine, personalized agriculture, city and local responses to challenges of various kinds, surveillance, are all becoming feasible. So it's a big challenge in data collection and analysis using available technologies, which is of great opportunity. And unless that opportunity is grabbed by the countries of the South, in India, in Latin America, and in Africa on scale, you're going to have a situation where these tools are being used widely elsewhere, but are not scalable and applied locally. Let me give you one simple example. You go to a farm in America, which is tens of thousands of acres, you will have all the farming data analysis and feedback mechanisms done by one company, say John Deere, and feeding back to a farm operated by a handful of people. You go to places in India, farms are typically very small, a few hectares, and the challenges of local changes in soil composition, local weather, fertilizer use, pesticides use are a very different kind of scale. But the same kinds of technologies of data collection, drones, etc., can feed back in these two diverse contexts in very different ways. Now, the second opportunity lies not in the cyber world alone, but in the technology world, in bioprospecting and biomanufacturing, and using the tools available to have new solutions to old problems and having new ways of looking at our challenges which we have. And we talk a lot about CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, but really we've explored just the tip of the iceberg in the natural sphere. The deep oceans and our back gardens both have enormous amount of treasures to be discovered, and that prospecting needs to be done on scale. That requires support, a great support for fundamental research, which India is expanding on, which needs to expand even more to broaden the footprint, and that will allow the exploration of the natural ecosystem in multiple different contexts to lead to many new discoveries. These discoveries will result in intellectual property, and they will again have to be taken to sustainable development and to bioeconomies on scale through frugal innovation and scalability. India's one strength is scalability and frugality in these kinds of technologies, but all too often that has resulted in India waiting for patents to expire and becoming masters of generic approaches. That is changing dramatically. It started changing a few years ago during the pandemic, but Indian companies, Indian academia is also becoming good at innovation right now. That the engine of innovation and growth has been in the West for a long time, in America and in Europe, and that will continue to be the case for some time. But a partnership with India allows these questions to be addressed in large contexts in a way which will be a win-win for both. The standards and regulation are important. The data sharing mechanisms have to be clear, but those rules and laws are in place now, and therefore working together in a manner which is equitable and sustainable will allow both of us to work together to make the world a better place. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Vijay. And we will be pulling on some of those threads in the discussion as we move forward. I'm going to turn now to our next panelist, who will provide another few minutes overview from her perspective. And this is Dr. Valerie Sarisky-Reed, who is the director of the Bioenergy Technologies Office at the U.S. Department of Energy. Valerie, please go ahead.
Hi, I have a slide that I was hoping, oh, look at that. There it is. How wonderful. All right, well, thank you very much for having me here. I want to specifically thank Deepti. Deepti is part of the Department of Energy's program that I'm going to describe a little bit to you. She really is a true jewel in our national labs, so we're very lucky to have her. And I want to echo my thanks and happiness that we have collaboration and efforts going on with India across our national labs and programs. So let me start with talking a little bit about how carbon really is the backbone of life. It is part of almost every product that we use within our physical world. And biotechnology and biomanufacturing advances have really enabled us to transform how we produce these products in our world, things like fuels, fibers, and plastics. We're producing them or capable of producing them now from renewable carbon rather than fossil-based carbon. And that has a number of key benefits that I want to just briefly mention here. First of all, it's the reduction of releasing that carbon that's buried under the ground into our atmosphere. We no longer are able to absorb the amount of carbon we release, and therefore we need to come up with circular solutions and reduce that carbon release. But there are other benefits as well, as we've heard from speakers today about the different environments in India and in the US when it comes to our rural economies, farms, and things like that. This area can really open up economics and jobs in those rural economies. And I'll talk a bit about biomass and how that works in a minute, but also waste reduction, not only in rural economies, but in our urban environments. By providing for utilization of that waste, we can truly clean up environmental issues that have happened across all of our landscapes. So those are just a few of the benefits of moving out with biotechnology to really develop a solution to problems we face in the US. And this is the focus of the Department of Energy's program in our role in establishing a US bioeconomy. For over 30 years now, we have been involved in advancing the biorefinery concept, and you can see a diagram of that here. It mirrors a petroleum refinery, but it takes carbon-based feedstocks and converts them into a variety of products. So rather than bringing in that old petroleum-based carbon, we're bringing in new carbon coming from wastes as well as plant agriculture and forest residues and the like. This is incredibly important to establishing what will be an industrial-based bioeconomy. Beyond existing agricultural and forest residues, we also look into things like energy crops. This is a future for the bioeconomy because these will be energy crops or energy agriculture and forests that are grown specifically for the production of energy and products and not interfere with the production of food, feed, and fiber, and the other critical things we need from our agricultural sector. The Department of Energy's mission has been to conduct the necessary R&D to help us understand and improve the cost and availability of these feedstocks. They are very diverse. They're located all over the world. And with that comes a diverse need for technologies to be able to convert those. We also want to maximize their sustainability, things like understanding soil quality, how we can improve carbon sequestration with things like the energy crops, how we can reduce the need for water as we develop these into commodities, and reduce our need for fertilizers. We also take into account careful land use. We recognize that globally, the amount of available land is limited and different in every part of the world. So we want to take an approach that is satisfactory globally, but allows us to maximize our ability to produce these crops for the markets they're going to feed. In addition, we are very interested in the conversion of these feedstocks, as you can imagine, not just through biology. I want to point out that we also focus on thermochemical conversion. And in my mind, a bioeconomy requires both of those. Accessing biology through the feedstocks and being able to optimize its conversion through the most effective means possible to produce these products in cost-effective, sustainable manner. And last but not least, I want to jump off of a point that Dr. Mishra pointed out, and that is the need for scale up and how important scaling up these new technologies are. This is the future, and if we can't reduce the risk of bringing these technologies to market, we're going to slow our ability to take advantage of those benefits. So within the Department of Energy and our systems development and integration effort, we host an annual scale up funding opportunity that works closely with industry to provide the resources necessary to buy down the risk. Through public-private partnerships, we are seeing real products come to market. And in the last year, LanzaJet in Georgia announced the operation of its first alcohol-to-jet commercial facility, and we're finalizing that for the production of sustainable aviation fuel. That's just an example of how this type of activity is helping support industry get over those hurdles and be able to provide for the products that we're looking for. I listed here a number of focus areas to give you an idea of our current and future activities for the discussion later, but we see a lot of focus in transportation, in particular taking advantage of what we have today, which is Generation 1 ethanol. But we need to be more sustainable there. We need to look at how can we marry the biotechnology and biomanufacturing of that product with engineering advances and technologies such as carbon capture that can make these technologies more sustainable. We also are looking to drop in fuels. I mentioned sustainable aviation fuels. Important, of course, are chemicals and materials and how we might be able to take advantage through biotechnology of what biomass brings that fossil petroleum cannot bring us. And we can create performance-enhanced biochemicals. Think about things that are recyclable on demand with less energy use. And of course, agriculture, which is so important across our economy, not just for what we're doing, but for food and for other important needs we have. We need to maximize soil carbon sequestration. We need to improve plant genetics to produce the carbon that we need effectively, efficiently, and inexpensively. We want to demonstrate the energy crops that I've mentioned. We're looking to climate smart agriculture practices to improve how we take agriculture into the next generation. And I guess I'll stop there and look forward to the questions that we'll be talking about later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. And we'll turn to our next speaker, trying to get through these different talks quickly so we can get to the discussion as well. Mr. Srihas Tambi will be our next panelist. He is the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director at Biocon Biologics Limited. Go ahead, Srihas.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning to all of you who are joining us from the US. Just like Kate, I'm taking this call from a hotel room in Bridgewater, New Jersey, so I'm probably on the other side. And I must start with thanking the organizers and having me on this panel. I can clearly see it's got luminaries on the panel, and I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion. Let me start with an aspect which is very encouraging to note, and I do want to call out Dr. Mishra's comments where he said that the forums that he's participated in the past usually focuses on research and development, and he's very excited to look at seeing how we realize some of those exciting technologies. I think that's really music to my ears, particularly those who come from the industry. This is very heartening to hear. If I then take this forward and connect it with the policy framework, I think what Dr. Mishra says actually is embodied in the policy that the Indian government's put together, which is the National Biotechnology Development Strategy, and how apt for it to be very congruent with the US bold goals that have been set up, which clearly talk about three things, which is safety, security, sustainability, while the Indian strategy is focused right now on ensuring productivity, efficiency, and cost optimization or effectiveness. And what better overlap could we look at for these two countries, which have been excellent partners over decades? So I really draw upon on that as a great starting point from a policy framework, because everything begins from there, and that is where the initiative is. We've talked a lot about bioeconomy, and the last speaker talked about one aspect of it, which is on the biomass side. But let me broaden that aspect a little bit to see what does bioeconomy cover. Just from a country where I come from, at India, the bioeconomy itself was valued a couple of years at $100 billion. It's growing so fast that in the coming year, it's expected to be $150 billion. And in the next 5 years, which is till 2030, it's expected to be crossing $300 million. So when you have that kind of a growth rate, which is at a 70% CAGR, clearly there has been a focus both from the administration and also from the industry. But I want to narrow this down to a specific field within the bioeconomy so that we can get better focus in the discussion today. And I think one of the most evident aspect of this is in the healthcare segment, because while bioeconomy talks about several areas, including talent development, including crops, including security, including energy, but the one clear area is to see how does it impact us on the healthcare side of it. We just went through a pandemic, and I can tell you that that's probably a once in a century kind of an event, but it just woke everybody up to what is needed to be done in this particular kind of an event. Kate just referred to the Bio 5, which was set up with the 5 countries focused on supply chain resilience. But I go beyond that to see what has India done so far in this particular regard. Now, we've focused on bringing the COVID-19 vaccines to millions of people, and countless number of people benefited, countries around India, countries in Africa who benefited from the ability to supply vaccines around the world. Today, we are the 3rd largest supplier of the hepatitis B vaccine, the 2nd largest supplier of BT cotton, and the largest supplier of measles or BCG or DPT vaccines in the world. What this tells you is that this is something that is possible for us to do to resolve the challenges that the world faces today, and not just the one country or the other. But if I look at beyond infectious diseases, the real burden of healthcare has been in the non-communicable diseases space. Over the past 3 decades or so, the non-communicable diseases constitute to over 60% of the healthcare cost. And that alone in the United States has crossed $2 trillion. So that's a massive healthcare burden that we are dealing with. And no country, however large and strong it is, can do this alone. The bold goals that Kate referred to and the White House has published categorically states about how we are going to address this situation. It talks about how the US intends to bring in public-private partnership to make investments happen in this space. How are we going to make sure that we are going to be able to address security of supply chains? How are we going to bring products to patients so that they are always supplied with these life-saving treatments? I think that is where there is a huge amount of a possibility for overlap between India and the US. India has been the pharmacy of the world for several decades. With the US FDA that we just referred to, has over 650 odd facilities which have been approved for supply. But we can also see how the 2 governments can collaborate to bring manufacturing to the United States. The policy outlines 30% of manufacturing of key materials within the United States. I think India has a huge role to play here to ensure drug supplies and drug security, because this is a right to life. And this is something that India has a huge role and can play a huge role in ensuring this continuity. I believe that that is in the very ethos of what the Indian government's approach is when we look at it as the world as one place, or the Vasudeva Kutumbakam that the government talks about. There have been several examples where India and the United States have overlapped in the past. I think clearly the pharmaceutical industry has been the flag bearer for many of these initiatives between the two countries, and there's an opportunity for both countries to really take this forward as we bring more products to patients across the world. So I'll pause here and hand it back because I know that we're running a little behind time and there's several other questions that we can take as we go along. So thank you very much, and I hand it back over to you, sir.
Very good. Thank you so much. And yes, we will get back to some of these discussion points, and all of these topics are extremely important. This is a challenge in trying to manage a panel about the future of the bioeconomy, which, bio touches everything. And so it makes it a very difficult, a very large topic to try to capture. But with that, we'll go to our next speaker in this panel, Dr. Anurag Rathore, who is actually on the planning committee for this workshop as well. And I've been very pleased to work with him over the past couple of months in putting this together. He is a professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. So Anurag, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. So I'll keep it short. I know we should leave some time for questions, so I'll try to just. So I think, like Shreya said, that India and US, we have great synergy together because we already have had a winning partnership. When it comes to pharma products, India supplies more than 50% of the pharma products sold in US. So that kind of shows the, I would say, the trust and the bond that we already share. And I think, again, she has already covered this, but India happens to be, I think, the second country in the whole world in terms of US FDA approved manufacturing plant. So it just shows that that foundation, I think, exists to build something upon. In terms of goals, I want to say that affordability of biotherapeutic products is something that I really hope that both of us target. In the US, I think, of course, the per capita income is higher, but still, as you know, there is a huge burden in terms of healthcare spending on biotherapeutic products. And I think that has been highlighted by the Congress multiple times. But if you look broadly across the world, actually, including India, by the way, you'll see that affordability and accessibility to this class of products is actually getting worse as a function of time. And if you project it forward, you'll see that actually it's going to be a problem, right? And so all the talk about discovering new stuff, of course, that's really important, but we need to think about what already is out there, and can that reach, I know it cannot probably ever reach everyone in the world, but at least, can we reach to more than where we are right now? At the moment, we did an analysis on affordability, you'll be surprised that if you rule out Europe, Europe and US and Canada, the affordability of biotherapeutic products is less than 10%. It's like in single digit in the rest of the world. So it's really, really bad. And I think India and US together can, make a huge impact in that sense. And I think India has a key role because just like in pharma, if we are able to succeed, we can make a difference actually for the whole world in that sense. I feel next generation biomanufacturing is a way to go. Like Vijay mentioned, AI/ML based technologies, digitization, automation, these are elements that can be integrated. And if we can achieve that, I think that's the way to lower the cost of manufacturing and hopefully translate that saving into more affordable products. Couple of ideas on what can be done. I think early on, there was talk about what DBT is doing, and of course what the US side is doing as well. I think there is, it'll be great if we can have some sort of a call for proposals for joint academic industry collaborations to build on this new generation manufacturing. I want to highlight, NIMBLE. That's an organization where I think the US Congress has actually put in a lot of funding to, again, modernize biomanufacturing in the US. And I think on the Indian side as well, biomanufacturing has been highlighted, as a key topic for focus, both by DBT and by Biotech, which is the DBT agency. So I think both sides are aligned that this is important, but I think if we can build a common platform where we can jointly undertake projects, and I'm not saying fund research that typically NIH and DBT fund. This is stuff that with very clear deliverables, very clear endpoints, and there should be a clear association that, okay, this is how this will take us to the next the new generation biomanufacturing. Also, I feel another place where hopefully we can collaborate is to have like a tech transfer office, which is across countries, which which is approachable, so people can reach it, and which can basically assist in transferring technology. Because I think there's a lot of good work happening on both sides, obviously, but so far, so if I take the case of Nimble, for example, Nimble activities are limited to US, and similarly, obviously, DBT activities are limited to India, for that matter. So I think there is a lot of synergy and value if some of these technologies, some of this work that we are doing, we can align better, and also if we can transfer across in a more seamless manner. So I'll stop there in the interest of time, and of course, happy looking for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Anurag. That is very helpful, and thanks for your comments to just putting that in that broader context about what a successful bioeconomy might look like in the future. Our last speaker for this panel will be Dr. Sunil Chandran. He is the Chief Science Officer at Impossible Foods. Sunil, it's good to see you, and I look forward to your remarks.
Hello, everyone. Good morning to those of you in the US, or those of us in the US, and good evening to those of you in India. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be on this panel. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. My background, I've been in industry in the US, in the biotech industry for about 20 years now. And what my focus has been is to use biotechnology, and more specifically, fermentation. So, engineering microbes, and then using fermentation to really produce ingredients and chemicals, in a variety of sectors. Transitioned over to food manufacturing. So again, the way consumers today, especially in the US, eat meat is simply not sustainable. I mean, I read stats that say that if the meat industry in the US were its own country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So again, this is just simply not a way for us to be thinking of our future for the planet. That being said, my experience in industry has taught me a few things, which is, one, just giving a consumer a more sustainable choice is usually not the answer if it is not affordable or if it doesn't meet certain performance criteria. So, for example, a chemical that we produce that needs to go into infant formula, yes, it might be sustainable, it might be green, but if there's a premium on cost, you won't get widespread adoption. So for us in this sector, the way we like to think about it is we need to give consumers the choice, which will allow them to move away from, say, fossil fuel derived feedstocks or animal derived chemicals and ingredients, and give them an option that allows them to make that sustainable choice without sacrificing on cost or quality. We talked a lot about the pharma sector. We talked about energy. I think biotech actually should be sector agnostic, right? I think the tools we have, the science that we have at our disposal allows us to actually be completely sector agnostic. So what we can produce would be applicable in pharma. It can go into food, solve some energy issues. What we haven't talked about is cosmetics. I mean, production of chemicals for cosmetics is one of the biggest challenges that we have going forward. But a lot of those chemicals can be produced by using biotechnology. And finally, agriculture, right? There's no way to feed a growing planet using some of the techniques in agriculture that we have been used to. But again, science and biotech offers a solution over there. Um, now, the one thing I do want to stress on is R&D is hard. It's expensive, and it requires a huge amount of investment. And so one of the areas that we do need to focus on is how do you reduce that cost of R&D? And so one concept that we use in industry is what we like to call any project has to go through what we call a design, build, test, and learn cycle. And your time to market, your time to introduce a new product on the market depends on how many times and how much it costs to go through one round of a design, build, test, learn cycle, so DBTL. And the amount of time and investment, just, how many times do you need to go through it? How much time does it take to go through it? And this is where, a lot of the panelists have talked about using computational models, AI, robotics, automation. So how can we reduce the cost of doing R&D by running fewer experiments? How can you get access to data that allow you to answer the question without actually running the experiment? Are there prediction models that can use to do that? And so that is one focus that I've been trying to bring into at least where I work right now. Of course, there are challenges associated with it. The other one is, I think, while a lot of investment goes into the early stage R&D, I think the cost of scale up is something that is completely ignored. And frankly speaking, that is where a lot of companies end up actually failing. They have very promising technology that works in the lab, and then when they try to scale it up, that is when it fails. It's, unfortunately, this, and I don't mean this, as a joke, but we, in at least in the US, we call it the valley of death, because that's the scale of valley that a company has to go through in order to scale up the technology. And that, unfortunately, is where things fail, because there's just no investment and everyone ignores that problem. I'll end here. I'll just end by saying that, the best way to solve a problem is before it becomes a problem. And frankly speaking, a lot of the problems we face today, we could have predicted 20 years back. And if we had invested in solving some of those problems at that time, we wouldn't be where we are today. The other part I'll just say is, again, keeping in mind scale up. I always like to say that we should always start a project with the end in mind. So understanding what your end goal is from a consumer standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint, from a cost standpoint, and start with that in mind in the lab, because then it's easier for you to connect the dots and actually develop a product that meets the requirements of the consumer. And I think biotech, again, enables us to hit all of these goals. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you so much. I feel like we've heard, very different perspectives from these, from different sectors and different ideas about what the future of the bioeconomy might look like. I will note first that Dr. Vijay had to leave a little bit early, so we do not get the benefit of his wisdom here in the discussion. But for the rest of the panelists, I do want to just start pose an opening question, and maybe I will direct it to Anurag first, and that is, what does a successful bioeconomy look like? And I put the emphasis on the word bioeconomy because there's all of that word means different things in different contexts. And, as we heard from Dr. Kate Stevens, the bioeconomy executive order, that, in the US focused very much on things that were not health, related. It focused on the biofuels and the, different chemicals and trying to bolster those kinds of biomanufacturing and bio industries. But when you're thinking about the future, to what extent will those non-pharmaceutical parts be a part of the bioeconomy, and what does it mean to have a successful US-India bioeconomy, as a coherent whole, or will it never be a coherent whole? Will it be many different pieces that will all fall under a larger umbrella? So I'll start with Anurag, but I will want to ask each of the different panelists the same question. Go ahead, Anurag.
Thank you, Sarah. So at least, I'm kind of representing academia on this panel, so I'll answer it from that angle. To me, a successful bioeconomy has to be sustainable because as you all know, environmental sustainability is becoming more and more important for all of us. And at least again, to me as a person, it's important from a biotherapeutic perspective, but I think it can broadly to for all sectors, that it has to be accessible, because the industry, biopharma industry, has been around for decades, and it's actually, if you really look at it, it's ridiculous that still we are accessible and affordable to a relatively small portion of the global population. So whatever we do, humanity in general, everyone has to benefit from it, and it has to be done in a way which is sustainable from an environmental perspective, but I think from an economical perspective also, right? Because if it is not, then nobody's going to do it. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you. I'll go to Dr. Reed next, and then Srihas and Sunil after that. Go ahead, Valerie.
Okay. Yeah, I obviously agree wholeheartedly with the comments already. And I'll just try to take it a little bit further. Sustainability and resilience is key here for as I speak towards the industrial bioeconomy, where we need to have incredibly inexpensive products if they're going to make it into the market, but also take into account that sustainability, which it ultimately is going to cost money in order to ensure that these products are sustainable. So again, considering all aspects, it's already been mentioned, not only do they have to be environmentally sustainable, economically sustainable, but socially sustainable. We need for a population worldwide to recognize the safety and ability of these biotechnology techniques to change the way that we provide for products in our world. And that's, not going to be easy, since every country, every region takes a different approach towards how they look at this. So that is a key area that we need to focus on. Circularity has become a popular term, and it is important to be able to think about our resources as well as the products that we use in a circular fashion. So I do think that's a key to a successful bioeconomy, is to build that in from the beginning, to build in the biomanufacturing, advanced biomanufacturing techniques that can improve upon how we do things at the industrial scale. And I also want to point out that we cannot have a successful bioeconomy without the continuation of innovation. I don't think we've even begun to tap the ability of biology to continue to improve things that we're doing, as long as we're doing them again in that environmental, economic, and socially sustainable fashion. I think biology has a long way to go, and so continuation of that innovation cycle.
Thank you, Valerie. Srihas, what do you think about it? What would a successful bioeconomy look like?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. What does success look like? And the speakers have already talked about sustainability, but the underpinnings of anything which is sustainable in these policies is really to define the right to life, the right to health, the right to be successful over a longer period of time for generations together. Now, what does that really mean? If I heard what Anurag talked about, innovations, and if it's not affordable, it's not going to be accessible to millions of people who need that innovation to make their lives better. So if it's not affordable, it's not accessible. And if it's not accessible, then it's not going to be meaningful. It can be a little more provocative. It's actually meaningless if it's not accessible. So the focus on sustainability has to be that innovation is affordable so that it is accessible to most people. And I think there's a huge overlap for our two countries. And we talked about the intellectual capabilities that are available at both countries for us to really harness what is available to us. But most importantly, the willingness to do things for the betterment of mankind. I think that is such a strong common purpose that exists between the two countries, that there are so many more opportunities that we should explore. I do have a bias to healthcare because I believe that is something which we really need to explore further, with such a huge expense on public health. and it's only slated to grow. And there's so much that we can collaborate to make things better. So in my view, what success would look like is we work together rather than try to build everything on our own sides. I know bold goals on the United States side aspire to do 30% of things in their own country. And likewise in India, we heard Dr. Mishra talk about the ability to be Atmanirbhar. But I think what is really important is trust between countries so that we have a resilient supply chain, which is able to meet the needs as the situation arises. That is what success would look like to me.
Good. And Sunil, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll end with that. I mean, I'm going to echo everything the panelists said. I think consumer acceptance is a big one, right? I think even today, I think consumers are, or maybe they don't realize it, but biotech is quite ubiquitous with the pharma industry. But the moment you say that, well, I'm going to produce an ingredient that goes into food that will replace fossil fuel, there's a lot of suspicion, right? And this has to do with us not doing a good job of educating the consumer as to how biotech can solve your problems, right? If you think about it, when you say genetic engineering or robotics or automation, the first thing that comes to someone's mind is, well, I saw Jurassic Park, they did a lot of damage. And then automation and robotics, well, I saw Terminator, so this can't be good for me. And there's this perception, there's just this idea that biotech can be harmful. I think this is where I think we have to change that perception of the consumer, where biotech has the ability to solve a lot of problems in a way that other technologies cannot. And I think when a consumer starts accepting this as a way of life, that bioeconomy is part of what they can use to solve some of their problems, that is when I think we will be successful as a bioeconomy.
Great, thanks. One word, several of you brought up this point, and this is the one word that Dr. Sanjay Mishra said was echoing in his ears, and that is scale up. And we have a question from the audience as well that came in about scale up challenges in the US and India, and what are some commonalities in those places? Are there differences? Do people consider those things differently? Sunil, I'm going to ask you first. You mentioned the valley of death that we talk about in the United States, and so I would like are there opportunities there, for the US and India to work together to overcome some of those challenges with scale up?
Oh, absolutely. So, I'll start with the fact that, scale up requires a huge amount of infrastructure. Now, that infrastructure is expensive. Now, both the US and India do have the advantage that both are huge manufacturing hubs in the world. The question is, how do you use that infrastructure more, in a more efficient manner? So, for example, in the US today, setting up new facilities is expensive. The question is, can you retrofit older facilities to then meet what you need today? Same goes in India. Actually, India has a huge amount of infrastructure that can be repurposed for some of the challenges that we are talking about today, right? So using old fermentation facilities, using old chemical facilities that might be getting decommissioned. How do you then change those into something that we need today? It's also expensive to do manufacturing in certain sectors in the US. And I think this is where India has a huge advantage, right? It's a highly trained, highly educated workforce, especially in the engineering disciplines. And that can actually where you can transition technology from the US and scale it up in India. And that has a bunch of advantages. One, you get very robust and reliable manufacturing, but it allows you to keep your costs down because you get a very highly trained workforce, but OpEx is much lower in India than in the US. I'm not saying that it's exploitation, but I'm saying it's actually a really good workforce, but it works for both countries. So, but again, this has to be thought of right from the beginning, right? You can't think of it as an after the fact. You solved everything in the lab, and then you say, okay, where am I going to scale up? Well, maybe I should go to India, because then you're just going to be waiting for 5 more years. And so I think this is the kind of thinking that, how do you invest? Where is the scale up capacity that you have? I think solving that ahead of time is something that we need to be thinking about together.
Great, thank you. And I want to ask Valerie the same question in the context of biofuels, and then I will switch to Srihas to talk a little bit about in the biotherapeutics arena. So Valerie, like what does the scale-up challenge look like in the sort of bioenergy and biofuels, and what are the opportunities for the US and India? Oh, you're still muted, Valerie.
Sorry about that. That is the heart and soul of what my program is looking at, and it is something that needs to be built in from the very beginning when you're talking about taking a innovation from TRL2, technology readiness 2, up to 4, which is where we believe it ends at the lab and has to move on. Our program is set up to try to enhance partners' ability to do that first scale, pre-pilot scaling, and then pilot scaling, and then demonstration scaling. Deepti's program that she manages is an example of a tool that we provide in the US, and our Department of Defense with its BioMade program is also working to increase the number of facilities that are out there to help industry. But some of the key points I want to make, industry comes in all different sizes. The biotech industry is incredibly entrepreneurial driven, and it's many of these small companies or university spinoffs that can't afford the capital necessary to take those steps in scaling. And from my 30 years, I can tell you to skip a step could be detrimental to your success. So it is a long road to being able to prove commercial viability in order to get the financing needed. Public-private partnerships are helping there, but what we need is more capacity that's available so that it's not one-ups. One company builds its pilot and then moves on to its demo, but we can have this shared capacity. And I think that's a way we can help support reducing the cost of the scaling to get to that commercially viable product. I wanted to also potentially mention a couple of other things. It's one of the things we face in the world of use of biomass is its diversity. And this is not a one size fits all. We're not talking about just putting fermenters all over the country. That's important, but these are also going to require other engineering advances in order for us to move to products in fuels and chemicals. And so it is a bigger space that involves numerous manufacturing techniques.
Thank you. And Srihas, so what about scale up in kind of that pharmaceutical or biotherapeutics context? Are the challenges the same? What are some of the things that we can draw on to address these kinds of challenges with the US and India relationship?
Yeah, so that's a great question and of a lot of interest to me personally as well. Let me break down scale up a little bit. It's a very broad term. If I can put that into 3 phases, the first one being what Sunil referred to, which is in silico modeling, is if you can do this instead of running a wet lab experiment, I can actually model this in silico, then it actually accelerates the ability to predict how it's going to perform in a manufacturing facility. I would say that's scale up 1. Scale up 2 would be that I can actually build a facility where I can take that technology which was in the lab or in the model that I developed and was able to scale it at a level where I can now make product and sell it. That is the second level of scale up. But really, to be competitive on a global scale, there's a third level of scale up that is needed that brings you economies of scale, which is the third level of scale up, where you are then globally competitive. And unless you get to that scale, you're going to be just one of those players competing for cost, and it's going to be difficult to meet the supply chain expectation. So your resiliency of supply chain then gets challenged the moment you're not able to scale up to the third level. So if I break this down into this 3-stage scale-up process, what I really feel the pharmaceutical industry usually struggles with is the third level of scale-up. Because when you get to that point, you need 3 different things. You need first, which we talked about, I think Sunil referred to as people, the talent part of it. 2 is the infrastructure, and 3 is the investments. So you need these 3 to go together. We've seen policy changes, policy guidances being brought in I keep referring to the bold goals that the executive orders highlighted in the US, where it's outlined, whether it's the state level, the local level, the federal funding that is available through the public-private partnerships that have been encouraged, or if you look towards what the Indian government has done in the recent couple of fiscal budgets that were put together through the PLI, incentives, or the RLI incentives in the recent, budget that was announced, that really then gives the impetus to industry to make investments, because now there's a policy guidance which supports that kind of a scale up. And once you have that kind of funding investments, either it goes into talent development, infrastructure building, or then facility capabilities, then you are a globally competitive economy to do whatever you are really expected to do. So
Good. Thank you, Sihas. And Anurag, do you have anything to add here to the scale up question?
I just want to highlight that, I mean, focusing on this US-India partnership, because that's kind of the theme of our workshop, that India has, a considerable, I would say, expertise and edge with respect to digital tools, right? And you can see that in the marketplace because, if you look at the biggest multinationals, Amgen just announced opening an Indian center with 5,000 to 6,000 people focusing on digitization and AI/ML technologies. So I think where I can see this partnership is how to exploit these kind of new age, technologies towards, and I think some of that Shri has mentioned that, AI/ML applications in discovery, AI/ML applications in product development and process development, and also I would say digitization and manufacturing. At the end of the day, the cumulative impact that you're looking for is to make the entire process of product development, process development, and manufacturing more efficient. So it's not just saving money, it's also saving on time, right? So that you can move things much faster. And of course, time is money from a corporate perspective. And hopefully, like I said, if we can achieve that, which is actually very achievable because both countries have actually everything that you need to do this. But if we can just align, ourselves in terms of capabilities, and both of us see the value of this partnership, then I think we can make a huge impact, not just for US and India, but actually for the whole world.
Very good. Thank you, Anurag. I think we are going to have to wrap it up here, but I'm glad that we left on a point about sort of the AI and machine learning kinds of technologies. I think that any panel these days that includes the word future in its title has to have some good bit about AI. So it's unfortunate we don't have time to discuss this the whole rest of the morning or the evening. But I do want to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for your participation. This has been a really wonderful discussion, and I'll turn it over to Rita in just a moment for panel 2. So first, thank you to Sunil, Anurag, Valerie, Srihas, and I hope to continue the conversation in other contexts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. I will echo Dr. Carter's thanks and much appreciation to each of the panelists from panel 1. So now we'll move on to panel 2, which is entitled, What Policies and Strategies Are Needed for International Cooperation? And we are very fortunate to have as our moderator of this panel, Dr. Anil Sawant, who is Senior Vice President for Global Quality Compliance at Merck & Company. So over to you, Dr. Anil. We are grateful for your service as the moderator of panel 2.
Thank you, Rita, very much. The previous discussions have really made me very nostalgic. I wasn't connecting the dots between biofuels and biopharma, the industry that I work. So way back in 1982, I actually had a master's dissertation on conversion of biomass, aflatoxin-infected wheat, to alcohol. This was at Punjab University, microbiology department, 1982. I moved to the US, a little bit about myself, in 1984. for my PhD, and I've been in the US since then. I've been very fortunate. I started my career in academics and then moved to industry. I worked for 3 of the biggest biopharma companies, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and now Merck & Company. Through my entire career, I've been very active in the industry associations. So I've been a member of the Parent Drug Association for the last 34 years. And currently, I'm the chairman of the board of directors of the PDA. I do spend a lot of time in India. One of the things that I'm working on at this stage in my career is to look at access, specifically related to manufacturing in India. So I've been working on collaborations. I've also been working on setting up, helping the PDA chapter in India to build the infrastructure that we need for what is inevitable to happen within the biomanufacturing industry between the US and India. So with that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the topic is today. So our goal is basically to identify key policies and strategies needed to enhance international cooperation in biotechnology and biomanufacturing. Discuss the role of government, regulatory bodies, and scientific organizations facilitating collaboration between the US and India, and explore best practices and case studies of international cooperation in the biotechnology sector. Now, a little bit of my experience, my 35 years in the industry, I've seen how policies helped build the bioeconomy. In the early 90s, I moved to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico used to be the hub for pharmaceutical manufacturing. It had the highest concentration of pharmaceutical plants anywhere in the world, kilometer for kilometer, mile for mile. That economy is now moved to other parts of the globe, including Singapore and, of course, Ireland, which is a huge biomanufacturing location. And through it all, we saw how policies, the infrastructure that was built, the education system, the talent development processes have evolved in these countries to make them successful and where they are today. We've seen the same thing happen with China. And having seen this is the topic near and dear to me. And I'm pretty sure the panelists that we have will do a lot of justice on bringing their perspectives on how the two bioeconomies can be developed by harnessing the talent the research institutions are producing, and also the movement that's happening in terms of policy. So with that, I would like to ask our first panelist, Kashish Anisha, who's affiliated with Georgetown University Law Center, to say a few words and then talk a little bit about his thoughts, especially related to how we can move the needle faster when it comes to making products accessible, especially related to vaccines and biopharmaceuticals and what's happening, what happened during the pandemic, and what are the lessons we learned, and what is it that we need to do more. So, Kashish.
Thank you so much, Anil. And at the outset, thanks to the academies for having me at this panel. I think it's very encouraging to see how the academies engages so closely across sectors, including academic institutions and think tanks. So we are convened here today at the cusp of another global public health emergency, mpox. And as you may all know, WHO declared mpox to be a public health emergency of international concern for the second time in 2 years. And this declaration comes just a day after the Africa CDC declared the outbreak to be a public health emergency of continental security. And I mean, to be clear, the overall pandemic risk of mpox currently is low. But I feel this is a fantastic opportunity to reflect on what we have learned over the last half decade and how really to implement it. And And given this background, I think it would be fit for me to limit my remarks today to the biomanufacturing sector, specifically vaccines and therapeutics, both during routine and the outbreak times. And I feel that when we're talking about an international cooperation between India and the US, it is equally essential to talk about what both countries can do globally towards improving access to medical countermeasures by scaling up manufacturing capacities. And I mean, clearly the buzzword for the day is scaling up. So I'll just take a moment to describe the exact problem I am focusing at today. The availability of diagnostics, therapeutics, and especially vaccines has defined the inequality in the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Much of the vaccine research, development, and the manufacturing capacity, especially in context of the developing mRNA vaccines, is overwhelmingly concentrated in just a handful of high-income countries. Unfortunately, the response to the Mpox emergency is following a very similar trajectory. Although both Mpox and COVID are a bit different situations in context of the availability and the timing of the vaccines, but since 2022, parts of the world, specifically Africa, where the disease is endemic, is struggling to address the outbreak with the inadequacy of specific vaccines as well as diagnostics. There's already a massive shortage of the supply, and once again, which underlines the need for a decentralized production through diverse manufacturers. There are two broad major areas of access-related issues which were highlighted during the pandemics for the last 4 years. First one is going to be related to the barriers to the use of WTO TRIPS flexibilities, either it's in the form of the waivers of IP or compulsory licensing. And the second, which comes with the realization that even if we talk about IP waivers, it won't really work until unless there is adequate manufacturing capacities and the technical knowledge and expertise available. And that brings me to the importance of technology transfers of not only technology, but rather know-how and skill sets as well. We often undermine the importance of the transfer of know-how and skill sets. And I give an example. Back in June 2021, WHO had commenced the establishment of an mRNA technology transfer vaccine hub in South Africa. In this particular situation, IP-related barriers didn't really exist, but what was the major gap was in the context of know-how and the refusal of some pharmaceutical to transfer the relevant know-how. It's often said that sharing not only doses, but the knowledge is where the difference lies between charity and justice. So as COVID-19 and now as Mpox demonstrates, rapid disease identification and effective deployment of vaccines and therapeutics is essential for containing outbreaks wherever they arise, while limiting the opportunities for the virus to mutate over a dangerous variant. Unfortunately, we're already at a point with Mpox when the virus has been mutated. So, we've already talked how India has the greatest number of FDA-regulated drug manufacturing facilities after the US, and the United States government is one of the largest funders of biomedical research across the world. In this sense, India is a manufacturing hub, and US is the developer hub, and both these represent a unique opportunity, but at the same point in time, an important responsibility, both domestically as well as globally. I just quickly highlight 3 areas where I feel there is a scope of collaboration as well as introspection as far as both countries is concerned and the global outlook is concerned. The first, which we have already talked about briefly, is in context of scaling up or expanding manufacturing capacities. As a precursor to effective technology transfer, especially during pandemic periods, it's important to build up quality manufacturing capacities. Both the US and India could work together in establishing a global network of vaccine manufacturers, especially those based in the global south, and making sure that they are even sustainable during inter-pandemic periods. In India itself, there's been a shift in the Indian pharmaceutical sector from an earlier interest in the generic drug production to today, the industry is also keenly interested in developing and manufacturing novel therapeutics, vaccines, as well as digital health technologies. And I think we should take advantage of that shift. I'll give you a really interesting example. So CEPI, which is the Coalition of Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, is working to expand its network of vaccine producers in the global south. Earlier this year, CEPI decided to invest up to 30 million to build up upon the Serum Institutes of India already existing manufacturing capacity. As you know, Serum Institute of India is one of the largest vaccine manufacturers across the world, and it's located in India. With this expansion and investment, the company's existing ability to swiftly supply investigational vaccines for both preclinical and the clinical testing in the face of an epidemic and the pandemic threat would be expedited. That would result in the vaccine developers to timely transfer their technology to the Serum Institute of India in case of an outbreak. So, in a sense, shortening the time taken to manufacture and validate the first batches of experimental vaccines will be the key to enabling a response to an escalating outbreak within just 100 days, which happens to be the new objective of a lot of entities, including CEPI, and embraced by the G7, G20. So both India and the US here are in a unique position to collaborate to expand the global footprint of vaccine manufacturing, and this can be done in various forms. Interesting example again was back in 2022, President Biden announced licenses for 11 publicly owned medical technologies through the WHO COVID-19 Technology Access Pool. Another great example of international collaboration has been a research agreement entered between the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the South African manufacturer Afrigen, which hosts the WHO mRNA Tech Transfer Hub in Cape Town. And both these examples serve as an amazing precedent for NIH for sharing technology globally. Second core area I would like to mention is the review of the terms in vaccine development and funding agreements and the R&D agreements, especially those which have been funded with the public money, be it by the governments or the NIH. So such agreements should have a component of equitable access commitments built in. And this can take various forms, one of them including an obligation of transfer of technology to the 20 of the identified LMIC manufacturers. Other forms of equitable access commitments in this agreement could include inclusive research collaborations, open access data, or the timely publication of results, transparency, even negotiating a tiered pricing framework or reasonable pricing that is commercially reasonable for the developer and one that reflects the needs, including the price sensitivity of low-income consumers. And of course, the entire reasonable pricing should take into account the percentage of the public funding contributed to the R&D. And finally, signing non-exclusive licensing on a case-to-case basis. In the United States, the Bayh-Dole Act requires NIH and other government agencies granting partially exclusive or exclusive licenses to the US government-owned inventions to ensure that the scope of exclusivity is not greater than reasonably necessary. The NIH could, on a case-by-case basis, take advantage of the provisions of the law and can sign non-exclusive or have their exclusivity limited. For example, by omitting LMIC countries from the geographic scope of exclusivity, or by providing that a licensee will have its exclusivity curtailed or eliminated after certain revenue benchmarks have been achieved. I think I'll pause over here in the interest of time, and I hope to talk briefly about the pandemic treaty negotiations in the discussions. Thank you. Back to you, Anil.
Thank you, Kashish. So our next panelist is Shruti Sharma from the Carnegie Institute. So Shruti, take it from here, please.
Thank you, Anil. Hi, everyone. I'm Shruti Sharma, a fellow with the Tech and Society program at Carnegie India, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here today. I echo some of the sentiments and perspectives that have already been brought up in earlier discussions, so apologies in advance if I repeat a specific point of view. Having said that, I'll use the next 5 to 7 minutes to take you through the current state of India's bioeconomy and the role biomanufacturing plays in fostering India's bioeconomy. I'll also briefly describe how the new US Biosecure Bill impacts India's biomanufacturing industry and ways in which India and the US could leverage ISET to promote biotechnology cooperation. So let me start by giving you all a glimpse of some stats. Over the past decade, India's bioeconomy has expanded 13 times from $10 billion in 2014 to about $130 billion in 2024, with an ambitious target of reaching $300 billion by 2030. And as we've heard in the last panel, this growth has largely been driven by contract manufacturing in the biopharmaceutical sector, which includes production of vaccines, diagnostics, biotherapeutics, and biosimilars for international companies. But let me briefly describe why India is an attractive destination for contract manufacturing. So India's competitive manufacturing costs attract global biopharma companies looking to reduce their production expenses. Additionally, Indian companies, as some of my other panelists have mentioned, have a strong track record of exporting pharmaceutical products to regulated markets where they have demonstrated efficiency and popularity. India's ability to produce vaccines cost effectively has made it a leading supplier of DPT and measles vaccines globally. During the coronavirus pandemic, as Kashish mentioned, the biotechnology industry in India grew significantly due to its capability to develop, manufacture, and supply low-cost vaccines to the world. And as a major supplier of generic drugs, India is also expanding its presence in the biosimilars market in developed countries like the United States, with expectations that more nations will source cost-effective biosimilars for various diseases. But now the question is, where do we go next, especially in terms of India-US cooperation? So the United States is set to pass its Biosecure Act, which will prohibit the US federal agencies from contracting with or procuring services and equipment from biotechnology companies of concern. The list specifically specifies some Chinese companies, including BGI, MGI, Complete Genomics, among others. And if passed, this act will be a huge opportunity for India's biopharma industry to serve as a contract manufacturing hub. While there is no assurance that India would be an alternate destination, it is certainly one of the ideal alternatives since it supplies 40 to 50% of the drugs to the US anyway. However, for India to be able to become a suitable contender for contract manufacturing, it is important for Indian companies to ensure drug quality and good manufacturing practices. Beyond this, and more importantly, while India has been an active destination for contract manufacturing for the United States, it is now time for India to develop novel products, which we have also exhibited the potential to do during the pandemic, and build connections for it to be able to foster research and technology partnerships with the US. Additionally, we have heard from both Dr. Mishra and Dr. Stevens in their remarks that it is important to scale up biomanufacturing and enhance India-US partnership beyond R&D collaboration. One way to do this is under the BioX, which is a new initiative which was included in the latest ICET joint fact sheet. BioX could focus on identifying shared objectives and aspirations in the biotechnology sector. As Dr. Rathod in the previous panel mentioned, the United States aims to boost manufacturing to expand its bioeconomies. Simultaneously, India is also working towards scaling its biomanufacturing capacity to support its own bioeconomy. So BioX as a platform could facilitate discussions on collaborative research to support bioeconomies, address challenges in commercializing bioproducts, explore funding mechanisms, and identify regulatory obstacles that impede collaborative research. BioX as a platform should include startups, industry leaders from both small and large companies, academics, venture capitalists, biotech industry associations, policy researchers, lawyers, and regulatory agencies from both countries. But now the question is, how can BioX support existing programs? So to enhance existing cooperation in the contract manufacturing segment, BioX can be a platform to connect manufacturers from the US with companies in the United States to discuss how Indian companies can tap into US investments and highlight the uncertainties that American companies face while operating in India. Additionally, to scale up biomanufacturing, it is imperative to promote research collaboration. Hence, BioX could support the existing implementation arrangement that we've been hearing about that was signed between the US NSF and the Indian Department of Biotechnology to promote collaborative research to develop biomanufacturing solutions. Under this arrangement, researchers in India will be funded by the DBT, and researchers in the United States will be funded by the NSF. However, information and research under the implementation arrangement is often confined to researchers and grant-making organizations. So BioX could therefore be a pivotal platform in breaking these information silos, ensuring that policymakers, industry players, and other funding organizations and researchers are informed about ongoing projects to identify more opportunities for collaboration. This would help avoid research duplication, enable the development of new biomanufacturing solutions, and would also help keep policymakers updated on emerging technologies. But how can BioX support a new initiative when it comes to India-US collaboration? Securing adequate funding for projects that exist outside the implementation arrangement is still a challenge in both India and the United States. So despite the potential of the biotechnology sector, private investors, as we have heard in the previous panel, often hesitate to fund some early stage biotech ventures due to lengthy time before commercialization, often compounded by bureaucratic delays in bioproduct approval. So BioX could therefore connect researchers with the right funders and industry leaders who can fund different stages of biotech research to transform promising research into marketable products and services. In the long term, BioX could facilitate partnerships and technology transfer between companies and research institutions in the two countries, like Kashish mentioned. So these are just some of the ideas, and let me stop here. Happy to hear any questions, feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruthi. That was an excellent presentation, concise. You presented your thoughts in a manner that everyone understands. You did bring up some issues related to biosecurity. I'm pretty sure we can follow up with some questions related to biosecurity and what it means. So the next speaker, next panelist is Pushpa Vijayaraghavan. So Pushpa, can you please, in 5 to 7 minutes, talk a little bit about what your thought process and how we can go about establishing this Indo-US bioeconomy.
Thank you, Anil. Glad to be part of this discussion and couldn't be more excited about the possibilities given how opportune timing is. Speakers before me have emphasized and framed the opportunity in biotherapeutics. It clearly is a first port of call. Indian industry stands on a significant threshold of success. There's a $25 billion domestic industry, there's $25 billion of exports. India is an established global supplier of affordable pharmaceuticals that are quality assured. But as you look to the future, biosimilars has been a natural progression for several companies. But the opportunity as you look ahead for bilateral impact in the biotherapeutic space is clearly at both ends. One, at the left of the value chain, in terms of input materials, API as a chemical input material is beckoning in terms of transformation potential. In fact, reshoring API value chains is a key priority for both countries. But when we reshore those value chains, we want to reshore sustainable API value chains, right? So enzymatic biocatalysis in reactions in the API processes is a critical element where pervasive transformation needs to be achieved and needs to be rapidly achieved. Nimble, in fact, has had programs in that direction within advanced biomanufacturing in the US. Several Indian companies and institutions are at it, but there really isn't a strong collaborative platform to accelerate the potential of what's possible in API biotransformation today. And I think within the biotherapeutic space, I want to bring that up as an area that I foresee significant opportunity for bilateral impact in the future. But then you go right in terms of that value chain. And speakers before me have emphasized this quest for high value products in the Indian industry. Again, their opportunity to enable access in transformative care, not just in a health security or PPPR context, is also very true. So take an area like cell and gene therapy. Today, it's a tangible reality. At one point, it was a dream, right? So we're able to cure what was uncured before in indications which we thought were going to be hard to conquer. But that is not accessible to most of the world. A therapy that costs $500,000 is far from even a dream for most of the global population, which is where the opportunity for delivering transformative care in a manner that is accessible to LMIC is a possibility that, again, can be collectively, collaboratively achieved. There is a very strong pipeline in the US. There is an emerging pipeline in India. But there are key building blocks there, and this is also a session on enabling policy and regulatory frameworks. That needs pervasive thinking across the continuum, biomaterial movement, right? IP for co-invented genetic inventions, which are modified to genetic therapies, market shaping. These are markets that don't exist. So how do you collectively shape markets? And PEPFAR has a history of doing that in the HIV space in terms of creating markets. Indian companies have delivered affordable solutions, and together there has been a significant impact on outcomes in the world. So again, in an emerging area like cell and gene therapy, I see the transformative potential at the right end of the spectrum in terms of human biotherapeutics. Then I'll also step back here and reflect on the broader opportunity within India's biomanufacturing goals. India's biomanufacturing goals today are beyond biotherapeutics, covers the 6 broader pillars, out of which I'll call out 3 other ones other than biotherapeutics. Agricultural biotechnology, climate resilient agricultural value chains are going to be extremely important for food security. So that's one I'd like to park. Similarly, food biotechnology. The first panel, we had a great stage setting with a pioneering venture from the US in the food biotechnology space. But that's not just cell cultured meat and cell cultured milk. It's actually biotech solutions for fragrances and flavors and inputs across the value chain. In terms of food biotechnology transformative potential, and then finally industrial, right? The reality of API as a chemical industry actually applies to chemicals across, the whole bioenergy space again. So industrial and energy clearly is again a large space for transformation, and each have their own imperative in terms of creating a policy ecosystem that's conducive to bilateral acceleration, co-creation, and even at the market shaping end, creating healthy market pull for inventions that come out of the bilateral engine is also going to be equally essential. Within bilateral frameworks, the IP ecosystem can then be designed in a way that co-invented, co-accelerated solutions find their way to market in an accelerated manner. But those aspects can also be addressed within the framework of bilateral programmatic elements. But key regulatory aspects, LNG, in the first session, there was a reference to the recent regulatory development from the Indian regulator on negating need for bridge clinical trials in India. I think it's one out of many steps that together we need to identify on how we can declog potential for bilaterally accelerating impact. That I just want to conclude saying I couldn't be more excited about how opportune timing is to accelerate this opportunity together, and it's truly across the spectrum.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'd like to invite the next panelist. I believe Dr. Rita Narumala is on the line.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Do you want me to go ahead and get started, Anil?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anil. Thanks to the academies for having FDA on this panel. I've been listening to the conversation so far. I think this is a very timely discussion. As you all know, there's just a lot of interest right now in the collaborations between the United States and India, and FDA as part of our federal government enterprise has been extremely active in this space. So just to introduce myself first, I'm Ritu Nalvola. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Policy, Legislation, and International Affairs within the Office of the Commissioner in FDA. And this office serves as a focal point for all of our engagements with the department. We sit within the Department of Health and Human Services, also the focal point for engagements with the Office of Management and Budget and other entities within the White House, as well as with Congress, both on authorizations as well as appropriations, as well as with our global counterparts. So it is a huge remit. Our office is led by the Deputy Commissioner, Kim Tresiak, and I'm her deputy. By way of background, I've been at FDA for more than 2 decades now, and previous to this position, in which I've been for about 2 years, I was the director of the FDA Europe office, so I'm very familiar with FDA's global engagements. This workshop is, of course, of very strong interest and importance to my agency, specifically because FDA has a deep appreciation for India's role as the hub for clinical research, as well as for manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. We indeed have an office within India, placed within the embassy, the US Embassy in New Delhi. And our placements in foreign posts are not taken lightly. India is one of only 5 positions that we have in terms of in-country presence. And we are planning to also expand our India office by almost 50%. That would then make the India office to be the largest foreign office for FDA. And this is simply an evidence that we in FDA view our Indian regulatory, academic, as well as industry stakeholders to be vital and indispensable partners for us. For the conversation today, we've been asked to address a few specific questions to facilitate the discussion, and I thought those were very nicely framed. So I'll address the first 2 of those questions first. By providing you an overview of the US-India initiatives that we already have underway to advance the cooperation and alignment on biotech and bioeconomy. So India-US collaboration is, of course, a priority for the Biden-Harris administration, and it's also top of mind for FDA. We do have our Deputy Commissioner, Kim Tresiak, who's going to be traveling to India for the International Conference on Drug Regulatory Authorities, which will be hosted by India this October. Again, highlighting the importance that India has currently within the drug regulatory global partnership. Last December, the National Security Advisors of India and the US agreed to expand the scope of ISET. A previous panelist already mentioned this, and that was expanded now to encompass biotechnology. And there's a number of initiatives already underway within that initiative. One in particular is the launch of a track specifically on biopharmaceutical supply chain and formation of the Biopharmaceutical Supply Chain Consortium that held its first meeting in June of this year. And that brought together key industry and government stakeholders from the United States, India, the Republic of Korea, Japan, as well as the European Commission. And the main focus of that consortium is to identify and implement strategies to enhance supply chains for active pharmaceutical ingredients, as well as key starting materials, and then how to foster high impact R&D collaboration. These are very important areas for FDA, as you can imagine, given the type of products that we regulate. Another item I will mention under the ISET is the formation of or development of a strategic framework for building pharmaceutical supply chain optimization to strengthen global supply chains and reduce dependencies on single source suppliers. And this is an active effort led by the government agencies on both sides. Clinical trials, someone also mentioned that. That's of a very strong interest for us. We have a number of trials that we continue to provide inspectional and regulatory oversight for. I saw numbers according to a study in Lancet that India is 20% of the world's population, but only has about 1.5% of global clinical trials that are conducted. So it's a huge potential. And strengthening collaboration between the institutions on both sides to perform global clinical trials. That's a concrete area where I think FDA can support and both countries can strengthen research on bioeconomy. For our purposes, for regulatory purposes, for us, diverse multi-regional global trials are important, not only because they reflect the diversity of the population, but globalization of research has immense public health, social, and ethical implications and benefits. In the same vein on clinical trials, specifically in the area of oncology, our Oncology Center of Excellence has recently launched a project called Project ASHA in May of this year, and that is intended to strengthen cooperation between FDA and Indian government authorities to increase access to oncology clinical trials. And we've been sharing regulatory initiatives and guidances to provide assistance on global cancer care. This was also part of the recent US-India Cancer Dialogue that occurred in India earlier this year. And in both cases, for both pharmaceutical manufacturing as well as for clinical trials, our emphasis has been on prioritizing a culture of quality. This is a key objective for our work in India. As I mentioned, we have an office in New Delhi, and our FDA office works very closely with CDSCO, and in partnership with that agency have been advancing regulatory frameworks, harmonization, and strong oversight of manufacturing facilities as well as clinical sites. As you may know, CGMP is simply a baseline standard. And for us, staying in compliance with CGMPs, while important, we would love to see manufacturers show a commitment to continuous improvement of their performance and enhancing the levels of quality management maturity. Our Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, CDER, has issued a white paper on quality management maturity last year, and our India office has been doing a lot of advocacy and running workshops to promote the QMM principles. I think I mentioned clinical trials as well, but similarly, I think for not just for researchers, but also CROs, the contract research organizations, we think that there's more that can be done by way of best practices or ethical guidelines to ensure that clinical trials are designed and conducted appropriately and the integrity of the scientific data that is generated is protected. The second two questions that talk about international collaborations and harmonization, I want to touch on that as well. Dr. Califf, Commissioner Califf, visited India last year, and I had the pleasure to accompany him on that visit. And we visited a number of manufacturing facilities, research organizations, met with both industry, academia, as well, of course, with all of our government counterparts. And as he noted during that visit, there's tremendous and reliable work that's happening in India, and but there's more that can be done. And I think those efforts, while the government of India is investing actively in enhancing the manufacturing capacity, I think corresponding increases in strengthening the regulatory framework for pharmaceutical is important, so that there's an application of uniform requirements and enforcement of all products manufactured in India, irrespective of where they will eventually be sold. So FDA definitely applauds the efforts of the Indian government and continues to see availability of resources for regulatory systems strengthening. But I think there are some challenges that I think additional resources can help allay some of the issues that we have seen with both on the manufacturing capacity as well as engagement with harmonization organizations. We have been working with our counterparts in India to promote engagements in those international standard setting organizations such as the ICH, as well as the IMDRF, both on the pharmaceutical as well as on the medical device side. And eventually FDA has been working also with CDSCO and the competent authorities in Indian states to strengthen their inspection protocols to ultimately be able to have India join the PIC-S, which is the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme. And that's the international organization dedicated to harmonizing inspection practices and other policies. So these are some of the engagements that we believe are critical for regulatory consistency and to have regulators work together efficiently and effectively. So if I have to summarize some of the themes that I mentioned, for us, FDA's primary interest in India boil down essentially to investing in regulatory oversight, assuring one high standard for pharmaceutical medical products, improving clinical research, and ultimately promoting a culture of quality across the board. Supply chain, of course, a number of supply chain issues everybody is familiar with, and ensuring a secure, resilient supply chain is a high priority for us. And we do recognize the role that India can play and the tremendous potential that exists. So we are continuing actively to build our strong coalitions and partnerships with India to advance our own global priorities and the public health mission. So with that, I will stop here and turn it back to Anil. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much. This was very informative. And thank you specifically for pointing out the quality management maturity program that FDA has that is central to a lot of work that needs to be done, both in the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical supply chains, and for the stability that's needed for a successful bioeconomy. So thank you for that. The principles that apply to a stable bioeconomy are going to be common across sectors, whether it's pharmaceuticals or biofuels. How do we ensure that there's no disruption in the supply? Because that's the biggest threat any economy has, disruptions. So hopefully, there are lessons that will cross-fertilize and develop this movement where we can rely on the regulatory systems between the two countries on ensuring uninterrupted supply. So with that, let me ask some questions related to what role can academic institutions play in ensuring that we have the right mindsets, the right talent available to, build the supply chains of the future. There's some conversation about technology being used, how AI, ML, digitization is going to help with this effort. So any thoughts? I'll start with Kashish and then Pushpa and Shruti.
Thanks, Anil. So, on academic institutions, first, I feel like, of all the stakeholders, they are at a unique position because they enjoy an independent thought process. And I think that should be taken advantage by both the economies. I'll highlight two areas where I feel areas of potential collaborations between India and the US and academic institutions. And this, I, of course, speak in context of a law school, since I'm coming from the Georgetown University. So one would be carrying out independent reviews and assessments of organizations and their functioning in context of the goals they have set. And I'll give an example. So we at the O'Neill Institute in 2022 carried out an independent assessment of the equitable access commitment of CEPI, specifically in context of their COVID-19 vaccine development agreements. And even right now, we're carrying out similar independent reviews and assessments. So in that context, academic institutions and law schools working on these subjects can carry out independent reviews and assessments of organizations of both the regulators as well as policies set forth by the industry and the laws and the policies in place in both areas. Second, they can play a significant role in filling the knowledge gap on two areas. One is, as we mentioned, we've talked a lot about tech transfers, right? Even Dr. Mishra mentioned the need for tech transfers and how India is going to be supportive about it. Dr. Rathore mentioned about establishing tech transfer offices. There's a significant lack of understanding and knowledge about the implementation of the overall aspect of tech transfers, be it amongst policymakers, manufacturers, on even to an extent lawyers. So I think that's, of course, an area where law schools can come in. And second, general awareness of the laws and the policies of both jurisdictions amongst manufacturers. Take the example of Ayurvedic products. In India, Ayurvedic products are registered as a traditional medicine, and there's no equivalent category in the United States, and it depends on the specific circumstance that that a product may fall under the existing categories itself. And a lot of times the products exported from India and imported into the United States often get confiscated at the borders itself. And that rises just because of lack of awareness of the laws in the US by the Indian exporters. So I would say two things: independent reviews and assessments, and second, filling the existing knowledge gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Kashish.
I take it.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Anil. I think the potential is wide, but I'll focus on two specific things. One, I think areas of cross-cutting platform research, are particularly powerful in the context of biomanufacturing. India is contemplating biomanufacturing hubs within the broader ambit of the biomanufacturing policy. Those are meant to be fostering cross-segmental, cross-functional research. And likewise, in the US, right? When I look at a team in the University of Michigan, which is able to work on enzymatic biocatalysis and API, it's because they're able to bring chemistry, biotechnology together in a seamless manner. And that's what India's biomanufacturing hubs could potentially do tomorrow. So when you look at cell and gene, when you look at biomanufacturing, broad opportunity here to work on platform technologies, which can truly be accelerating where industry pursues application thereafter, but also bring in bilateral collaborations in cross-functional research, which is actually a challenge today for biomanufacturing potential to be realized. I'll go back to the API example. So today, if an API company wants to actually identify which enzyme could work for a particular reaction, they don't have the biotech capability to be able to do that. But a biotech venture often doesn't have the chemistry set up to see how that functions with the chemical process, right? So, and then you're bringing in elements of producing enzyme at scale after that, immobilization, potentially in silico capability into all of this with computational power enhancing the possibility of what you can produce. So that power of cross-functional research is truly in an academic context, and collaboratively, bilaterally expanding that potential, I think can bring in an engine that truly pushes us forward. I think the second aspect I want to emphasize is spin-outs and translational research coming out of academia moving forward. Again, opportunity to accelerate pathway in terms of value accretive partnerships. I have a great example in our own backyard, which is, science that came out of a West Coast institution being advanced by a Hyderabad-based venture today. This is a peptide for crop inputs funded by an affiliate venture capital fund, advancing towards US EPA approval, can potentially reduce application of chemical insecticides for a problem like nematodes to a great extent. So a potential solution for climate resilient agriculture, advanced only because of a spin out from a West Coast based academic institution, is being advanced through Hyderabad in a very collaborative manner towards global markets. And in a very capital efficient manner as well, in terms of the journey so far and what it will take to get to US EPA approval. So getting US spin outs, translational research already advancing towards markets to participate in what normally only large companies tend to do in terms of leveraging global value chains for both capital efficiency, but also value accretive data and validation advancement could all be, again, very valuable in the context of our goals in the biomanufacturing, biotransformation context. So those are the two I think would be top of my head.
Ruthie, your thoughts? And then I would like to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about what the industry, and there's a very well-established pharmaceutical industry in India, which has been quite successful. And in fact, they're launching some very good products, including biosimilars. So what do we learn from that industry and the way they went about doing? I think the pharmaceutical bioeconomy is already established. The question is, what's the next stage for biologics? What is going to happen with biologics? And how do we build? How does India and the US build on the success that we have seen with small molecules, with drugs? So any thoughts related to that?
Yeah, let me try and take a crack at it. So I think the Indian academic institutions, they have a lot of good research that's happening in their labs. But a lot of researchers working in these labs are often motivated to maybe write research papers, but are not so motivated to kind of translate their research into marketable products. Ecosystem, and this is where I see industry playing a crucial role. So I'll go back to Dr. Anurag from IIT, who said that we need to establish tech transfer offices. So the tech transfer offices should not only be set up as an institute which facilitates technology transfers between India and the United States, but it should also serve the purpose of translating research that's happening in academic institutions to maybe the private sector who can actually then commercialize that research. So this is where I see that those tech transfer offices become important. And I would like to build up on what Kashish said in terms of bridging the knowledge gap, right? That's really important because what the Indian academics are producing is not necessarily what the industry needs. So if you set up these tech transfer offices and these tech transfer institutions, whatever you want to call it, the translational offices, in these academic institutions, it will serve two purposes. One is it will connect and become like a regular interface for your researchers and industry to kind of collaborate and talk about what is that the society needs and how the research should be guided and motivated. And second, it would also help you minimize the skill mismatch, right? So there can be like a regular update of the education curriculum to make sure that the graduates are actually market ready. So this is just one of the thoughts that I had.
Okay, thank you. So Pushpa brought up, biocatalysis, enzymatic reactions to even make small drugs. I can share with you that I'm aware of companies which have been doing this for us, for my company, for many years, of some of the very key APIs. So the technology is available, the talent is available, it is the matter of scale. And I think that's the conversation we started with today. How do we scale up? How do you make that economy successful, to have a successful economy? That's going to be the factor that we need to work on, identify areas that we can collaborate. I think it's in the interest of both US and India to work on this access problem. We in the US have an access problem. And Big Pharma has an access problem too. We would like to supply novel drugs, not just biosimilars, old drugs, novel drugs to the world. Our problem is how can we make that in a very efficient manner? And India seems to be the solution for some of these problems companies are trying to tackle. That's why you're seeing a lot of big pharma companies announcing deals and setting up offices, etc., in India. So yes, as an industry, we are interested in making sure that we solve not just the access problem in India, US, but it's a global access problem. How do we make medicines available to patients across the globe? And if we can share, ideas, thoughts, and how we could go about doing that, whether it's through regulations, whether it's through collaborating with other health authorities, whether it's through things such as ICH, PICS, etc. I think it'd be good to hear, especially from research and academic institutions, how could they help this movement that's happening? So, Kashish, you brought up the issue of, I guess, the example of mRNA technology transfer. So is it really a technology transfer or is it a talent issue? And I bring this question up because last year I was at a UNIDO meeting, specifically, it was a site meeting with a WHO meeting focused on Africa and supply to Africa. And I had the opportunity to meet with the individuals who are now building the African Medicines Agency. And one of the things we talked about is the talent pool available? If I were a businessman trying to set up a plant somewhere, one of the first things I want to be sure that the talent pool is available in that country. So I know we have a session, tomorrow panel on talent. But this is an area that we need to start thinking about. How do we ensure that the talent is available? Because sometimes we talk about things in generality, but there is a deeper reason why even commercial organizations, manufacturers do not go to a specific country, because it's not a sustainable market long term. We have seen that with other parts of the world where companies have started and failed to be successful, even though it was not a VC problem, it was not a finance problem, it was a talent problem.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if I could just add on there, and I mean, as I also mentioned, when the mRNA tech transfer hub was being established in South Africa, one of the key gaps was the talent itself. But I mean, to date, they have been able to fill that gap. And in fact, what the tech transfer hub does, they've identified 15 potential manufacturers across the world, mostly all of them in LMIC, that will be the beneficiary from the tech transfer hub. And it's a 6-degree hub in context of transferring not only the tech and the IP, but also focusing on the training and the knowledge of the scientists in these countries. So I think such hubs across different continents, and especially those, those focusing at building up the capacity at the LMICs would be the key in that context.
I can jump in here with my perspective. I mean, I think for us, we're a regulatory agency, so we have an important function, but somewhat limited, narrow space in this entire continuum, right? So when you talk about talent, I mean, it's hard for me. I can't imagine anybody would disagree that with the fact that there's incredible talent in India. I mean, I don't think that is an issue at all. Some of the brilliant brain power that exists. I think it's about how do you harness that? How do you provide a nurturing, conducive environment to take that talent into a product? And even so, that's still only one step, right? Then there's multiple other things that have to come together. I think each one of us, researchers, from product development to pilot to scaling up to then when you manufacture, make sure that you have that quality, because it only takes one hit to then lose that trust. I mean, we've seen issues with cough syrups in India. So I think along the way, making everybody recognizing the role you play, ensuring the public health aspect of what we are doing. Ultimately, that is the goal, to provide medicines, therapies, treatments that are safe and effective. They do the job that we claim that they do. I think keeping that goal in mind and nurturing the talent, bringing it from concepts to market, and then the continued maintenance that's required to keep those products safe and effective in the marketplace. I think recognizing the role of each of those entities along the way, I think is needed. On specifically your question about academia and research, it's not FDA's place, but I know that within the US government, there are other entities that can support some of this work. The National Science Foundation and DBT recently started an initiative where they're able to support joint funding for collaborative research proposals, specifically on the biotech innovation space. So just wanted to add that there. So that's my perspective.
So thank you very much. I think for sharing your perspective, you're absolutely right. India has a lot of talent, both on the technology side and especially in the biopharma sector. The question is, how do you harness that? Quality issues are not unique to India. We've seen those here too. I mean, the Boeing story still there is playing out, how things large corporations can also make mistakes. And therefore, to ingrain that culture is going to be very, very important to maintain a stable bioeconomy. So we are at time. Thank you very much. And, the dialogue needs to continue. And I look forward to, I guess, the closing remarks for today and the rest of the session tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We certainly do thank this panel, each of the speakers, and we thank you also, Dr. Anil, for your leadership in moderating the panel. So now we will transition to back to the project lead of this very important effort from the National Academy of Sciences, and that is Carmen Shaw. Over to you, Carmen, for concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. So thank you, everyone, to our distinguished speakers, panelists, and moderators for your insightful contributions today. So that concludes day one of our two-day workshop on the scientific, industry, innovation, and governance landscape for biotechnology research and development in the United States and India. So today really has kind of highlighted the power of collaboration and keeping an open mind to exchange knowledge actively and come up with practical and implementable solutions and suggestions for many of these common problems. So we've explored a wide range of topics across the disciplines, from biopharmaceuticals and biologics, medical research, bioenergy and sustainability, to regulatory frameworks and systems, as well as some practical areas like knowledge gaps, tech transfer, supply chain resilience, and export control, each of which play a vital role in shaping the global bioeconomy. So again, on behalf of the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, as well as our wonderful and supportive partners at ABLE India, I want to thank you all for making today's discussion so meaningful and practical and relevant. So we invite you all to join us again tomorrow, same exact time, as we delve into biosafety, national security, research and development accessibility, as well as biotechnology investments and workforce development. So we'll see you all at the same time tomorrow. And until then, please take care, and we look forward to continuing this discussion together tomorrow. So thank you.